Okay, guys, so the big question I get asked a lot is which of these roles are meta in FC25 and which roles should you be prioritizing? We're going to go through that. Don't ask how I know, but I'm just going to go through it. Certain things I can say, certain things I can't say. Now, in terms of the roles itself, foot.gg, they actually have a really nice view of the roles. Now, there's certain roles that do certain stuff, okay? But also, like, unlike real life, for example, I always use the example of a poacher. And the reason why I said poachers making runs in behind, people saying to me, Neil, do you not know what a poacher is? It's not that. It's just that in FC, as you can see, they mainly stay forward and focus on making runs in behind. So although you might see, for example, a word like a poacher, don't expect that to be a poacher as you would think in real life. That's very, very important. Now, if we're talking about strikers, okay? Actually, no, we'll start off with the defensive line, okay? So we're going to start off with a defensive line, and one of them I want to start off is a sweeper keeper. Now, this is the biggest change next year. Sweeper keepers, they now go up to the halfway line. So actually, this heat map is not natural representation. In fact, actually, you know what? I'm just going to go to my Patreon School Series. Goalkeepers, they actually go all the way to the halfway line. So you can see this full video on my Patreon series. I got them for every single position, by the way, explaining how the positions work, how they move inside the game. But for example, assuming this is the ball over here just behind the camera, the goalkeeper will stay on the halfway line, okay? This is very, very important to know. So goalkeeper will stay on the halfway line. And what that allows is that when the ball is moving, the goalkeeper will come forward when the ball is in the opponent's half. And then when the ball ends up traversing back to your own half, the goalkeeper goes back. Now, the only way you can get beaten right now, and this is a Nil Guys exclusive, if anyone does this, precision lob pass over the top. That is the way to beat that situation. So a lot of these things are important. The first one I want to talk about is a goalkeeper. So Edison is an example of someone as a sweeper keeper. Now, I think this is the one that I think this year, for unique play styles, you're really going to like it. I think we never really had this before, whereas now we do. So let's say, for example, like someone like Edison, right? Edison has a sweeper keeper playstyle plus. He's going to be performing that well better. Don't forget, around about 40% of the player's movement, AI movement, will be determined by roles. But because roles also changes the way the player acts, even though it's only 40%, it could have a greater aspect on how they play. So if you're the kind of player that likes to build up from the back, right? And let's say you're saying to me, you like to push the ball with your goalkeeper, press triangle, especially a pro player, and do precision lob passes in behind or lob ball in behind, then a sweeper keeper would be one of the best playstyles, one of the best roles to use inside the game. And that's why this year it's a bit dependent. There are a few meta ones. So you have the other goalkeeper ones, which is traditional goalkeeper that stays on their line. It's not going to make that much of a difference. I think the playstyles here would have a bigger impact than the goalkeeper itself, okay? Now for centre backs, okay, you have a stopper. Think of this kind of like an aggressive centre back, probably the best way I could put it. Think about the normal defender being a normal defender, as you would historically, stays in line, stays in shape, doesn't compromise his position. I would say for most people, you would be looking for a role plus for a defender. But the ball playing defenders, when you have possession of the ball, they actually lift up towards the CDM position, almost in midfield. So that is a good thing to use. But again, it'll be dependent on what players you can use. So for actual defenders, I would say the centre back, defender plus, the cards that you're seeing now, the database just came out literally an hour ago. So the cards that you're seeing are still getting updated. So there's way more cards, I think. But Saliba will be an example of a centre back that's a defender plus. Now, don't forget, there's also different roles that defender could have. So let's say Saliba has a defender role plus. He also may have a stopper role plus. So you can basically choose which role you want to do. So that, I would say, from the defending standpoint, I would say, especially for people that probably struggle with counterattacks and are always out of possession, you want to be using the defender, just a typical one, the plus, and I would say the defense version. Things like the stopper are a bit more for those that understand when to push their centre backs forward. But to be honest, I'd rather just play a defender and then just be a bit more conservative. And if I want to push forward, do that yourself. Don't let the game do that for you. That way, if you make a mistake, you can say, oh, it's my fault. You don't want your game to bring out a centre back, pushing that player forward, and you could be in trouble. Now, the build-up play will kind of come back to in a second. So that is kind of the goalkeepers. Again, now left back and right backs. Now, in my opinion, false back is probably the best one. Structurally, I think the ability to move a left back and right mid to reinforce centre mid will allow the rest of your attacking players to go forward. So, for example, in this game, you can, if you, let's say you have a cam, okay? Let's say you have a cam and you put a cam as a shadow striker. We'll come back to this in a second. If you put a cam to a shadow striker, you're effectively moving someone out of that cam or that, let's just say, for example, say the center midfield line. Okay, they're going into the shadow striker, which is in between the strikers and the cams. But the center mids can go up and help reinforce the midfield. So you can create these unique formations. So I think, personally speaking, the false back, in my opinion, for those that like to pass the ball around and like to change the shape, especially having at least one fullback moving forward, because what you could do is you could have one center mid playing as a half winger. So what you can do, for example, here, I'm just going to show you a quick example. You can put, for example, a center mid to a half winger. So let's say, for example, we have the 4-4-2. What you could do in theory is in a 4-4-2 and a 4 midfield, you can make one of the center mids be a wide player. So end up being a 4-3-3 basically. No, not even a 4-3-3, that's wrong. But you can make one of the center mids become a winger. So you end up having essentially a front five and one center mid. So if you have a front five and one center mid, you can ask one of your fullbacks to join the midfield. So effectively, you'll have a center mid normally, a left back and right back making a centre mid. So you'll be defending with a 3-back. So in possession, you'll be have a 3-back, 2 centre mids, and then you'll have the front 5. So that is why I think for creating these unique systems, I think the false back will be used a lot. Now, I think the regular fullback will be more than good enough. I would suspect most people will be using the fullback just to defend. I don't think you need a plus variation for this per se, because you see, with a false back, they're actually moving into the center mid position. So using the plus role is very, very important, because the better that plus is, don't forget also to adhere to tactics. So, for example, tactics change the ways. If I go, for example, here, right? And let's say we have tactics, right? Tactics affect your build-up, not the final third. Again, the key is build-up, okay? So tactics can really affect your build-up play. So that is why, in effect, it's very, very important to have especially with players playing as a half winger or someone that's not in their native position or going out of position, you'd want to use a role plus. You can get away with a player that stays in position and doesn't step forward with just a regular role. You won't need to put too much emphasis on that. There's only going to be a few players out of the role plus as well. Do bear that in mind. I do think the attacking wing back also is another possibility, because the attacking variation of attacking wing back, the way they make their runs, they're not like how fullbacks were last year. And sometimes you can find them as, I like to think of like attacking wing backs. It's almost like a winger and like the left back and right back from the old 5-2-1-2 formations, stuff like that. They kind of in their own space, but they push up even further forward than a traditional left back and right back. So I would say, if you're asking me, the false back would be the one, attacking wing back, and then the fullback just being unbalanced. If you're looking for a false back right now, the only player I believe is Trent. In the database, I think the only player is Trent on the database that he can play there. So he'd be basically playing that centre mid. And you could argue in theory with the false back plus, he's going to move into position more seamlessly in possession, and out of possession, he's going to get back in time, because that's where you'll be countered, would be when you lose the ball. So that's something just to bear in mind as well. For CDMs, I think the main one, centre half, you can actually make a back 6. You didn't hear that from me. You did not hear that from me, but you can make a back 6 when you're in possession. Actually, you know what? Let's make that the meta, so they patch it in the first month, so we don't have to wait till 6 months later and people say, oh, it's not an issue. But anyway, the holding CDM, in my opinion, the defend variation would be the most important. I think a lot of people this year are going to be struggling. It's because you're used to, in effect, you're kind of used to how last year you had cut passing lanes. As I said to you, that's your opponent's cam, that's your opponent's striker. The cut passing lane instruction made that CDM go in a correct position, so you can switch that player and you're there at the right place at the right time. Now, the defend variation, I think for people that are, if you're like less than an elite player, like let's say you're not an elite player, this would be the biggest thing for you. Try to at least get a role plus in that defensive position, because the role plus will mean that player will be in the best place at the best time. But of course, there's like a debate. Okay, how far do you go? And what I mean by that is, let's say, for example, we go to players. And let's say we go, and you can check this out on foot.gg, by the way. Let's say we go to CDM and we go to CDM holding, for example. how far do you go? So would I go and get Paulinho, who's got 52 pace, even though that player's got a CDM++, I still wouldn't want to use them because they're too slow. But someone like Stanway was going to be the best centre mid. It was the best centre mid last year, with the best centre mid this year, because she can hold that position. She's got good stats as well. So you have to bear that both in mind. Don't forget, the role will only be the 40%. But that 40% will be off the ball. So if you're like, as I'm saying, if you're an elite player, your switching is going to be perfect. You're going to know when there's two players like that, and you got to move your CDM in the right place at the right time. The average player, probably you're watching this, you're not going to have the reactions in time to do that. So that's where AI will help you, okay? So it's very, very important, in my opinion, for at least one of your CDMs, if you're playing a CDM formation, to have at least a role plus. That would be my recommendation, and good stats. So maybe you don't go for, unless you're getting Stanway into the team, maybe you don't go for the role plus. Maybe instead just go for the sort of role plus plus. Honestly, these plus pluses and plus plus is too much sometimes. But maybe just going for, again, here, you can see there's a much more variety with just the role plus. You can see there's so many more players you can choose from. Chouameni, De Jong, Barella, De Paul, all these players. Lema, one of my favorite cards I always use. So that would be another thing that you can bear in mind. But I would say that's good. And the rest are not too that important. Maybe you can argue centre half, but I don't want to promote that kind of stuff. So let's just skip forward. For the centre mid, I would say half wingers, because centre mids, they basically move from the centre mid to a wider area. So you'd ideally want a centre mid that's got pace. So let's say, for example, theoretically, if you're looking for a half winger, so let's say I'm looking for a half winger. I don't think there's any half winger. Let me double check this actually. Half winger playstyle pluses. Is there anyone? There's a few players. Okay, maybe Barella is a good example of what I would use. Even Bernardo Silva, because Bernardo Silva got the pace upgrade this year, big pace boost compared to last year. So you can put a hunter on him, at least it's a bit quicker. But this player is going to be playing on the wider areas. You want someone here who's realistically got pace. So maybe instead of going for a plus plus, because Barella, although he's good, I would say he's more of a centre mid. I'd probably likely go for example, I had a player in the back of my head, if I remembered correctly. I'm trying to think if I can remember that player. I don't think I can. It was a player that I thought about, but anyway, that's the wrong one. Get rid of the plus plus. So Valverde would be a good example. Done. That's the one I was talking about. Done. Last year, she was very, very good. She can play that centre mid, but she can also play on the wing. So when you're trying to build these formations, if you're looking for someone that can play on the wing, that's naturally a centre mid, you could use that. So let's say, for example, if you start in a 4-3-3, I need to actually draw this out. Where is my tactical board? Hang on. Let me just draw this out very, very quickly. But so what you could do, for example, in theory, is let's say here, let's say, for example, you got a 4-3-3. Let's make it a bit wider. Let's say you got a 4-3-3, and this is your back four, right? You can't even see that. I just realized. Like this, like that, perfect. You can see that. So what effectively you can do is you can make one of your centre mids play as a half winger, and then technically you'll be playing in a 4-4-2-4 or 4-4-2. So that is something that you could think about when you're squad building to try to get your budget in check if you have a centre mid that's quick. So I would say, especially a half winger who's moving out of position, you ideally want to go for a role plus. If you just use a normal role, I'm not saying they won't perform. They're still going to make that movement, but they're going to make their movement better. And from what I know historically from the thousands of people I've coached for years, is that people get killed on the transition. People concede goals because of counterattacks. And if you're using things like false backs and half wingers, you're going to be out of position. Your team's going to be out of shape. And that's ultimately what's going to cost you. The playmaker centre mid, I don't think it's okay. The box-to-box would be a good one as well. Don't forget, because there's no work rates as well. Before, you choose a centre mid that's high, whereas now you can argue you'd ideally want a box-to-box centre mid. The role plus plus would kind of be what was historically known as the high work rates per se. That would be the best way of explaining it. The holding centre mid, it's okay, but they don't sit as deep as a CDM. Remember that. In the Patreon video, I explained that as well. Check that out if you're part of the Patreon. But that is very, very important to note because it's kind of like playing a 4-4-2 flat as opposed to the 4-2-2. For the cam shadow strikers, I can imagine people still using the 4-3-2-1. There's no left forward and right forward or left centre forward, right centre forward anymore. They're now cams, but you can play them as shadow strikers. So You can play the 4-3-2-1, but it's going to be nerfed because the strikers don't stay forward. But these shadow strikers, I think this would also be a very, very good meta play style. I keep saying play style, honestly. Role. This would be a meta role that you can use inside the game. And of course, you can also make a cam half winger, same thing as well. Playmaker, I don't think it's that important, to be honest. Okay, now for left mid, right mid, the normal winger is probably the meta one. But for the left wing and right wing, the most important thing here is the inside forward. Don't forget the inside for the inside forward, you only have attacking and balance as the two focuses for the left mid and right mid. But for the wing, right wing and left wing variations, you do have the one roaming. This is going to be the one that you're going to be seeing me use. This one I like because those players, they occupy the spaces. I explained this in a picture video, so go check that out. But they occupy these unique spaces and they exploit gaps, and they actually really do. So this, in my opinion, if you can get a role plus, someone like who's got is like a Vinicius Junior. I'm not actually too sure. I'm gonna have a quick check actually. Let's go role plus. I can tell you. So for shadow strikers, let's have a look. So for shadow strikers, someone like Lavelle will be decent, and Musiala. I think with Lavelle, with that pinged pass as well, is probably the best combination. But let's say now we're going to go to, I'm trying to think, let's say inside. I'm trying to think, we'll just do both. I think we'll just do both. We'll find both the left wing and the right wing inside forward. So yeah, so a player like Vinicius Junior will excel exception as well. Someone like Hansen as well. Hansen, don't forget, as a 5-star this year. She's been upgraded. So she's definitely going to be one of the better cards inside the game. But players like that will work exceptionally well. That have got the pace, the sprint speed, almost like a second striker inside the box, because they literally cut inside. You know how last year when you put a wing on cut inside, they just cut inside a little bit. They don't actually go into the box and make those diagonal runs where you would have to substitute that with like a creative run on L1 trigger. Whereas this roaming function, that's the one that does it. And the wide playmaker, it's more for a unique playstyle. Let's not go over that too much. And then strikers, in my opinion, so the target forward, now this is their description. An attacking outlet physicality allows us to hold up play, shield the ball, and they feed on crosses whilst the pass is feet. I think of this as a strike you want the ball to go to, and you're going to do a skill move. Although most people are not going to be using target forward, okay? Then you have advanced forward, which I'll be say the one is what most people will probably be using, because they make runs in behind and it stays close to the opposition's defensive line. But they sometimes they're not going to be the furthest player. The poacher will be the furthest player going forward. They're going to stay forward. They're going to be focused on making runs it behind and getting it behind. So this, in my opinion, would be the most meta role for strikers. And then false nine, I think it's no point going over that. But that is what I would say. Okay. Now, don't forget. Remember, this is the most important thing. People are always going to forget this. People that skip to the end, that's their fault. Familiarity only gives the rate up to 40%. The rest also depends on positioning and defensive awareness. So it's a combination of everything. So I would say the roles will really make sense in those CDM roles. For example, a cut passing lane instructions is gone. Someone who's a role plus will really be in the right place at the right time. In fact, I'd probably say play styles have the highest tier in how it affects the player, or play styles and stats, because they kind of go hand in hand. And then roles is below that. And then chemistry, I would say, would be below roles, because if I put a player with zero chemistry, let's say I put Vinicius Junior as the inside forward, he's still going to be making those amazing runs. But if I put, for example, someone with, 10 chemistry, but they're an average player in that role, they're not going to be as good as Vinicius Junior. So that's something that I would mention to you. So ignoring the role aspect. So I would say the weighting will only make a difference for those unique plays. Like if you want the person to get in behind and you want that all the time, the poacher is going to be important. If you struggle defensively, you need a defensive player. That will be an example of the CDM holding and the centre backs on defend. If you want that false back or that half wing or those unique positions, that's where the role plus will really come into shape, or something like the sweeper keeper. Anyways, I hope you enjoyed this video. Just a bit of an insight on kind of what I think. Who knows? They could change something when the patch comes out. Maybe they buff something, they change something. Who knows? But I'll keep you updated in regards to that. Don't forget, want to get better FC School Patreon. Can't even speak anymore. If you want to get better FC25, come to my Patreon. So it's patreon.com/guys. Links down below in the description. We've already started FC School. And if you don't get better after 1 month, we'll refund your money. That's a no guys guarantee. And that is how we know you'll get better, guaranteed. Because if we don't, we'll refund your money. What you got to lose? Nothing. Anyways, thanks for watching. Links down below. And of course, catch you next time. Peace out, guys.